She's very active in human rights, in women's rights, the arts, the environment, community, and family. Having been appointed by Jimmy Carter on the President's Commission on Holocaust, she became a founding member of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum and recently has been reappointed by President Obama. Dukakis' name is known in American politics, but I think Kitty has taken it a level way above that by, first of all, coming out as having suffered debilitating depression and not keeping it a secret, but openly talking and being willing to put it in writing. And her book on the ECT, which actually gave your life back, first was published in 2001, and then again in 2006, which is very close to the time that she spoke to us at the Hellenic Association. That evening was very memorable because, and I hope we are going to have the same treat today, it is not only talking about how hard it is being a psychiatric patient, and this, of course, is something that we psychiatrists should know, and especially you, the young, the future, should know. It is very difficult being a psychiatric patient, but it is impossible to get well in medicine, in my opinion, no matter what your illness is, without support. And the absolutely central role of the family, especially the spouse, has played. So I hope we are going to have a little bit of a taste of your adventures as a couple in this wonderful recovery, because the message is of hope. So without any further time, Kitty, I'm going to give you the floor, and it is our pleasure to welcome you.
I'm going to ask my husband, which I don't normally do, to interrupt me if I go on for too long, because he helped me. I have not spoken in the last 3 or 4 months. I broke my ankle in a fall down our central stairs in our house, and I really am very fortunate to be alive right now. When I realized that I went down all 16 stairs and screamed for my husband, who came immediately. But the reason that I fell was that I did not want to disturb his sleep. And I did not turn on any lights, so it was pitch black when he finally found me at the bottom of the stairs. And anyhow, I am totally free of pain. I started back at Pilates 3 days ago, which was just more exciting than you can imagine. I'm a former dancer, and not being able to do anything for 3 months was just, and having that god-awful boot. And I kept saying to Michael, I want to find somebody I really can't stand so I can throw this at them when I'm finished. But it's just a real pleasure for us to be with you. And thank you so much for that introduction. And it gives me a wonderful opportunity to sing the praises of the medical staffs who have helped to treat me with such extraordinary compassion and sensitivity. And since I am treated both in Massachusetts and in California, I have a rare opportunity for all of that. I love my doctor in Boston, and I love my doctor in Los Angeles. And that makes an extraordinary difference, let me tell you, in this field especially. For there are thousands of others like me who have suffered with clinical depression that simply do not respond to antidepressants and to talk therapy. And ECT has been what my husband, Michael, has called a miracle in our lives, and a miracle it has really been. In fact, I'm not sure that Larry Ty, my co-writer, and I could have prepared ourselves for what we have experienced, especially in this last year. We hoped our book might do is to help destigmatize the treatment of depression and other mental illnesses. And since our book has been published, there is a small amount of recognition and learning, but not enough. And 4 or 5 nights ago, Michael and I saw a television program, which some of you may have seen, that just infuriated us. And fortunately, we can get angry about this and have some influence. But a social worker on this program who worked in the ECT department, I don't even remember where it was. Where was it?
She was a social worker for a very troubled man. And she was unhappy about how he and his wife were caring for their kids.
They took them away.
And when she discovered that he had ECT, that was a reason for
Taking the children away. Can you imagine?
in Chicago. Think about it. It was really.
We have so much more to do in this field. What has truly been astonishing is the volume of mail from our computers and our email sites and the stories we have been told, many of them so extraordinary that we have been moved to tears. And I'm a crier normally, so that I am sure before this evening is over, the tears will come. In fact, the response to our book has convinced me that there are thousands of patients who have suffered for years from depression without relief, who today are still not being given and are fearful of the option of ECT. And when they have that option, the results can be overwhelmingly good. Soon after Larry Ty and my book was published, for example, I received a letter from the nurse manager of the from the ECT unit at Huntington Hospital in Pasadena. And some of you have heard this story before, but it's one of the most fulfilling stories in this repertoire. From Pasadena, California, he told me about a woman who had suffered from chronic depression for decades, weighed about 90 pounds, and was in effect slowly dying from depression. Despite years of treatment, ECT had never been recommended to her. Fortunately, her husband happened to pick up a copy of a Newsweek magazine when he was having his hair cut, the edition of which told about Larry and my book and had excerpts from it. He took the article to his wife's psychiatrist and asked him about ECT. And for reasons that I still have difficulty understanding, ECT apparently had never been recommended to them. But the doctor referred them to Huntington Hospital, and she commenced treatment there as an inpatient because she was in such poor physical shape, as well as her mental condition. She weighed 90 pounds when she was admitted. After the second treatment, the patient was in her hospital room with her husband sitting beside her when the nurse manager knocked on the door to see if there was anything he could do to be helpful. The patient and her husband were holding hands and crying softly. And the nurse, concerned about them, asked if he could help. The husband looked up at him and said, "No, these are tears of joy. After 30 years, I have my wife back." It was such a dramatic telling for me. And I did spend time with this woman. It turned out that they were the same ages as Michael and myself, and we had a lot in common. Unfortunately, as many of us know, many people are still fearful of the treatment, and in many cases, that fear is reflected in their doctors. In fact, when Michael and I first sat down with Dr. Charlie Welch at the Massachusetts General Hospital, we too were very concerned. On the one hand, we were desperately looking for an answer to the recurring bouts of depression that I had been experiencing every 8 or 9 months for some 17 years. And those depressions were brutal. They lasted for 3 or 4 months. Nothing except alcohol seemed to bring me relief. And as we all know in this room, alcohol really provides no lasting relief. And if at all, it makes the problem worse. It exacerbates the problem. Charlie Welch calmly and patiently explained ECT to us. He asked us to watch a video in which other patients talked about their experience with the treatment, and on the strength of his confidence and assurances, we decided that when we faced another round of depression, I would have the treatment. Approximately 9 months later, sure enough, I began getting those depressive feelings, and in fact, they started when Michael and I were spending a week in Paris, France. And what should have been a delightful week in one of the greatest cities in the world proved to be anything but. In fact, I was in such bad shape that I asked Dr. Welch to hospitalize me because I was afraid that I would miss my first treatment because I might drink. And he allowed me to be hospitalized that night, and I had my first treatment the next morning. It just so happened that the following day was our wedding anniversary, and we assumed that any celebration was out of the question. Michael picked me up at the hospital after my first treatment, and I turned to him as we were driving home and said, "Let's go out for dinner tonight. After all, it's our anniversary," and he almost had an accident. He couldn't believe it, and I think the accident happened on Storrow Drive in Boston from the surprise. He just couldn't imagine that his wife, who the previous evening was as depressed and as shaky as he had ever seen her, now wanted to go out to dinner to celebrate. While I proceeded to have 4 additional treatments over the next 2 weeks, the first treatment ended the depression, and I was one of the unusual patients to have such a very fast effect of ECT. I still experience depression in approximately 9-month cycles for reasons that nobody can explain, and it has nothing to do with stress, and I've had some of that in my life, or what I am doing or where I am. It just happens. So fortunately, ECT is there for me, and thank God it is. Yes, there are side effects, principally short-term memory loss, but then medication has its side effects. And my sister is very generous with me about pointing out that she has never had ECT and has worse memory issues than I have. She's a year younger than I am. And I appreciate her honesty about this. We talk about it often. I talk to my sister almost every day at her home on Cape Cod and in New Hampshire. For many people, medication and therapy work well, and for many of them, they are the key to a happy and fulfilling life. For those of us who get no relief from medication, however, ECT is a godsend. And yes, there is some short-term memory loss, although for me it is relatively mild. And in my case, I find that some activities that happen just before, during, and just after treatment may disappear altogether. But I think of those lost memories as trade-offs. That trip of ours to Paris before my first series of ECT treatments is a case in point. I remember absolutely nothing about it. Several months later, I was speaking at a mental health conference at Florida Atlantic University on the subject, and I talked about the fact that I had no memory of that week in Paris. Michael, who some of you have heard maybe in the past, is rather frugal, spoke up from the back of the conference room and said, "Sweetie, I'll take you back." And I had 300 people listening to him, and I knew that he couldn't wiggle out of that commitment. We stayed in the same Left Bank hotel that we had stayed in before, and soon after we got there, there was a knock on the door. And I opened it, and my sister was standing there with her hands on her hips. I said, "What's the trouble?" She said, "How could you have come back to this crummy hotel?" And that has been a standard because I had no memory of that earlier hotel.
Charming hotel. Right across from San Francisco.
We differ on that one. But I said, I simply don't remember the place, and we have laughed about it and talked at some length about it, that if that's the price I have to pay for feeling so well, I do so eagerly. In fact, the more series of treatments I have had over the years, the less I seem to experience memory loss. And I can't explain that, but it is one of the most interesting aspects of the fact that I am now on ECT once a month and have a treatment once a month, and it's maintenance. And that's why I am so puzzled when I hear about patients who suffer from persistent and chronic reoccurring depression and who don't respond to medication and are not recommended for ECT. At least in the United States, this seems to happen all the time. And one of the places I want to visit is a hospital in China, a 1,000-bed ECT hospital in, Michael help me, Beijing, where they are doing extraordinary work with people with continuing depression. The problem that I now concerns me the most is that I have received hundreds of letters and emails from people who, like me, had suffered from clinical depression for years and have gotten no relief from medication. And these days, it is not one pill, but it is 2 or 3 or 4 with all the side effects that those chemicals can produce. In an extraordinarily large number of those cases, ECT has never been recommended. And too many of those cases end in tragedy. So that one of the things I am attempting to do with the ECT section of the American Psychiatric Association is to develop a series of protocols or guidelines that will help doctors and patients alike determine how long medication will be prescribed without effect before ECT is recommended. Should it be 6 months, a year, longer? Does it depend on the severity of the depression? The likelihood that the patient may seek to take his or her own life? Moreover, at least in the United States, the quality of ECT treatment varies enormously from site to site, and I think many of you who have been involved in this field know that. Should one have unilateral or bilateral treatment, inpatient or outpatient? I know that each patient is different and must be treated as on an individual basis, but the variation in treatment in the United States that I find a cause of real concern. And how do we deal effectively with the fears of those who still view ECT through the lens of the movie, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Here I believe that those of us who have experienced success with the treatment and those of you who recommend and administer it must come together in the form of a worldwide support group and be available at a moment's notice to those who need us. And Michael, I can't read your writing. Michael went over things and changed them, and I've never been able to read anything he's written. What? Okay. But with your help, I would like to start a program that I started in Massachusetts, a self-help support program, which has men and women in it and makes it fairly unique. I don't know of any self-help group like this that encourages both husbands and wives to be a part of it. And we have had some real success in Massachusetts, and I'm hoping to start a group in Los Angeles and another one in San Diego when we're there, because those are the two places where I had wonderful help. The only problem I have at the hospital I attend in Los Angeles is the name of the hospital, and every time I go into it, I have to look at the name of Ronald Reagan, and it's a bit disconcerting. However, there are thousands of us who are living happy and productive lives thanks to ECT, who would, I believe, be more than willing to share our experiences in a very personal way with people that are suffering and deserve better. Why not create a network of us and of ECT practitioners that is organized, available quickly, and can make it possible for those of us who have been helped so much by ECT to talk on a one-on-one basis with others who are desperately in need of help and our assurances. Thanks to our book, I have been in a position to do that hundreds of times, and I believe it is time for those of you who are practitioners and those of us who have benefited so much from your care and the work you do with ECT to come together in an organized way to reach out to others. We can not only be helpful, but we can literally save lives. And before we have questions, let me just introduce Michael back to you. He has been an extraordinarily supportive spouse, and I am very grateful. One of the things Michael did last year was to do a search on my mother's background. And then we traveled for 2.5 weeks this past fall to visit the 3 countries where she is from: Hungary, France, and Germany. And attended the school. Michael had made all those arrangements, attended the school that she attended in Berlin, where they, in Frankfurt. I keep thinking of where my parents met. And it was an extraordinary experience for her. She then was sent to see Karen Horney and then attended a school for nursing and social work. The fact that she came out of that experience during the Second World War as a complete human being and was able to deal with my dad, who was a very loquacious musician. That's the only way I can describe him. He was everybody's best friend. Everybody who met him loved him. He never understood, quite literally, why Mother would not share with us the real story of her background. And when I was 17 and a cousin slipped and told me about it, I was infuriated. And I came home from camp I was a counselor at that time and was teaching dance and swimming. My friend left me off, and I accosted my mother immediately with the information that I had been given. And I said to her, "Mother, I want to talk to you about this." She said, "Now you know." That was the end of the discussion. And so I had to wait. My dad was at conducting school with Pierre Monteur in northern Maine, and I had to wait for him to come back. And he was full of information for me when he returned, and as he always had been, and as I knew he would be. So we are going to be celebrating 50 years of marriage in June. We have these 8 extraordinary grandchildren who, on my birthday, the day after Christmas, spent a good part of that day at the computer writing down 76 reasons why we love Gigi, which is the name that I was given by my oldest grandchild. And each one of them participated in this computer birthday card, and it was one of the most beautiful gifts I've ever been given. Michael?
The 70, don't go away, so people are gonna, the 76 reasons was because Kitty was celebrating her 76th birthday, and I, these days, introduce my wife as the best-looking Medicare recipient in America, and I think you will agree, among other things. Just a couple of words before we have a discussion, and I hope we can have a good conversation about this. Mental illness, needless to say, is something which, for those of us who consider ourselves reasonably healthy psychologically, is very difficult to understand. Here I'm married to this beautiful woman who's bright and lively and involved and committed, and who for some reason, beginning in 1982, starts experiencing these recurring cycles of depression for no apparent reason. I mean, we've lived a pretty stressful life, as Kitty says, it's never been dull. But look, stress is part of what you do when you're in public life, and both of us like it, enjoy it, and are committed to it.
Most of the time.
Most of the time. But most politicians are also optimists. I mean, we think that if we work hard enough, we can find a solution to things. You know, you can solve problems. And this one was just baffling, folks. Just baffling. And Kitty had, the best docs and the best treatment and the best this and the best that. And the one frustrating thing about it was that I still don't understand why it took 17 years for somebody to finally suggest ECT as an option. And it was 17 years. And it was almost an accident. Kitty
And I had a doctor at the same hospital who was anti-ECT.
ECT, and it never suggested it. So to have her go through this agony for 17 years, and each time it happened faster, deeper, and her only relief was to drink herself into unconsciousness, literally. And it was a guy named John Matthews at the Massachusetts General Hospital who was the first person to say, "Have you seriously considered electroconvulsive therapy?" Answer, no. Then he asked us to talk to Charlie, who's a wonderful guy and a wonderful doc. And it was only then that we even considered it. So that's one of the reasons why Kitty thinks that we got to do better when it comes to this kind of thing. For me, it was always a question of, well, there must be something better out there. There must be something, maybe another pill, maybe this, maybe another that. But as Kitty said, even when she'd finally come out of these things, there was always a kind of black cloud over her head because she knew that 8 or 9 months later she'd be going back in. And so did I. So needless to say, for both of us and for our family, and we happen to have 3 great kids and 8 wonderful grandkids.
By the way, one of whom, our middle child, Andrea, who's a reporter in Denver, can tell when I am beginning to go down by my voice on the telephone.
Even before I know it, right, the rest of us. And maintenance seems to do the trick. So we have a monthly treatment in Boston at the Mass General, and when we come out here, and Kitty just had, when was your last Friday?
Thursday.
Friday.
Was it Friday? Was it Friday?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's past Friday.
Okay, you're right.
Had her treatment. Dr. Espinoza is a doctor and does the treatment at UCLA, and it's very convenient and seems to work and so forth. She's also, she didn't tell you this, but she does grand rounds all over the country and has done this at many, many hospitals, which is one of the reasons why she has this sense of kind of variation in ECT treatment, which concerns her. And I'm, needless to say, very supportive, and I think the idea of a growing support group of people, docs and patients who have had success with the treatment makes a lot of sense. And as she says, especially as a result of the book, I mean, she's getting inquiries all the time from people and tries as best she can to respond. In any event, this is our 18th year, win a quarter at UCLA. It's a terrible burden, but somebody's got to do it.
Michael can't bear to hear me talk for 2 months before we get out here about how
cold she is.
miserable I am.
And she's a native-born New Englander. So I teach at Northeastern University. Most of the year, come out here for the winter quarter, and it's really been great. And great to have an opportunity to meet Maria, you and others, and and share our experiences. But
And also, our kids are now old enough, all but 2 or 3 of them, our grandchildren are old enough to come and visit us without their parents. And
it's the big deal. They come out with their Papu and Gigi. She doesn't want to be called Yaya. She wanted to be called Grammy, and our first grandchild couldn't say Grammy, so she's been Gigi ever since. Come out here on their own and so forth. So, life is good. The last election night, as you can imagine, for us was maybe the best election night we've ever experienced, including my victories. And we were, as Kitty says, deeply involved with Elizabeth Warren's campaign and felt great about that. Now Kerry's going to be Secretary of State. We got another election coming up, so it never stops. But being in on this journey, folks, and seeing Kitty's recovery and her continuing recovery has really been a wonderful thing. And although I was deeply involved, both as a legislator and as a governor, in trying to improve my state's mental health system, and in point of fact, signed a universal health care bill, in 1988, which was a hell of a lot better than the one that Romney proposed, and was passed, only to be screwed up by my successor, Bill Weld, who was a bright guy but never understood health care, and was basically a carbon copy of the Hawaiian plan, which is basically a state version of the Nixon plan. And but because of that active involvement, obviously the public side of this thing is important to me as well. And as I was saying to some of the folks at our table, while it's not the whole answer, needless to say, especially for the severely, chronically, and mentally ill, you have no idea what a difference it makes when virtually everybody has comprehensive health insurance, which includes mental health and substance use benefits. It makes such a difference, and as Maria pointed out, it's a money saver. Because as all of you know better than we do, these folks can get treatment early, get help early, the chances are they're not going to be institutionalized. Chances are that they will be able to deal with these problems. So one of the aspects of the ACA, which I'm not sure enough people are talking about, is the dramatic change it will make, in my view, in treatment and support for folks suffering from mental illness and addiction. 2 maladies, as we all know, which often go together. And you're going to see it happen. And I hope it's going to happen effectively and it's going to happen well. It's not a reason for not providing for severely and chronically ill people who do need, obviously, substantially more intensive care and maybe over a longer period. But it's going to make a huge difference, in my view, in how we respond to mental illness in this country. Anyway, enough from us. Questions, thoughts, reactions? Yeah, go ahead.
I think because of our relationship has been so close, and that we have shared so much with each other, we also have 3 kids who have been extraordinarily supportive, and they don't get to first base sometimes with their father. As soon as I had my fall down the stairs, they were on the phone with him saying, "You and Mom have to move." And, that's just not going to happen. Michael is very happy in the house that we've been in
Maria, I have a vegetable garden in the front yard, and I have to have a Greek salad every night during the summertime. I mean, sorry, I can't get that in an apartment or in a patio. Let me just say one other thing for my dear wife. She's nice to say what she said about me and the kids and stuff, but Kitty is a sharer. I mean, she's somebody who doesn't hold things back, and who, in her particular case, believes that she had something to say which was important that might help people, and in point of fact, has helped thousands. And in fact, her father used to tell me that even when she was 5 or 6 or 7, she'd bring the most bedraggled and beat-up kid home and comfort her. I mean, she was a born social worker before she got an MSW. And she's just one of these people that, it happened to her. Finally, after years and years and years of this, there was a treatment that worked, and she just, as a very helping person, had no qualms about sharing it, and did so. And she's not the only one. Betty Ford was another. Had a huge impact. And frankly, I think we're seeing more and more of this these days, people who are willing to share this. But the stigma's still there. Can you imagine a social worker
We're gonna
considering
do some testing
EC
about
treatment,
that.
well, considering EC3 a disqualification for parenthood. I mean, God Almighty, you'd think we're back in the 19th century again here. But it's Kitty. That's Kitty. I mean, that's who she is, and she really had no qualms about sharing her experience and the success of this treatment with people.
One thing that just happened recently was that I had one bad experience a month ago
In Boston.
in Boston. My leg was still in a cast, in a boot. And I had treatment and woke up from that treatment an absolute basket case. I was alone in the house. Michael was at Northeastern. And I have since found out that the medications that I was supposed to be given were in short supply. That will never happen again.
Well, it was a different muscle relaxant that was used.
And it was a nightmare
And Kitty's reaction to it for
for me.
5 or 6 hours after the treatment was just brutal. And we went back and talked to Dr. Welch, who was really terrific. He said,
And the doctor here.
yeah, but, that's just an example. I mean, you're all docs, and you know that these things can make a difference. Just turned out that this particular, but then, Kitty had serious back surgery out here in March, which was quite successful. And I brought her home from Cedars, and in about 2 days, I had a completely delusional wife in my hands. This had nothing to do with her mental condition. And she thought we were back in Boston. The kids were around. And I'm saying, what the hell is going on? So I called our primary doc out here, a guy named Ron Sue. I don't know whether you know Dr. Sue. Was a wonderful guy. And I said, Ron, I don't understand this. I mean, Kitty, he says, what's she taking? And one of the things she was taking was, I think, another muscle relaxant. Phenerilla, what? It starts with
Flexeril, thank you.
And let me
Awful.
tell you something.
Tricyclic antidepressant.
Yeah.
It's a terrible
No, but it was given to her because of, for her back.
muscle, yeah.
And Ron said, get her off that stuff, 3 ibuprofens and 2 Tylenols. And in about 12 hours, I had my wife back. So, it isn't just when it comes to mental illness. I mean, we just got to watch these medications, folks.
And one of the things I just want to say, one of the things that has made both of my doctors comment to me is my relationship with anesthesiologists. They see patients in their worst possible condition and see them getting better. And many of us who are on the table don't talk to them. I happen to be one of those people who do a lot of talking to the anesthesiologists, and they have been very appreciative of the kind of support that I have been giving to them, but they should be a part of any support group that we start here. Yeah.
Thank you.